This podcast is offered through the Sacred Community Project, an interspiritual collective working to lower the barriers of access to contemplative and devotional practices. Through the universal teachings of love, service, remembrance, and truth, SCP utilizes modern technology to promote eternal values. Learn more at sacredcommunityproject.org. Hey, this is Sitaram Das here, introducing another episode of the Sacred Community Podcast. Today we have a lecture from Anna Lay, who is the Spiritual Support Coordinator for Sacred Community Project. And in fact, Anna is the one that, if you ever reach out for spiritual support through Sacred Community Project, she's the one that's receiving your email and making sure that you get the care that you need, either because she's providing the support herself or getting you connected with one of our incredible spiritual support volunteers. All of our volunteers actually have gone through our year-long Loving Rock training program. So they're all extremely well trained. And in fact, this little short snippet of lecture that we have here from Anna was taken from one of the classes from the last training program. We're in the process right now of actually reorganizing and redeveloping the training program so that a version of it can be open for the general public. So the idea being that in terms of Sacred Community Project's mission of actualizing sacred community in the world, one of the ways that we see that this can happen is if more of us can really develop these Loving Rock skills. Yeah, Loving Rock being a term that Ram Dass developed and that was central for me and the direction that my life took. I still remember the moment when I was sitting next to him and he said, "Your job when you're sitting bedside with the dying is to be a loving rock so the dying person can push against you and pull against you and you stay rooted in love." And I still remember in that moment, I was a young man in my early and mid-20s trying to figure out, what am I going to do in this life? What am I going to be when I grow up? What am I going to do for a career? What is my dharma? Right? All of those questions. And when I heard him say those words, every hair on my body stood up and I felt just this surge of feeling. And it was so clear. And I said to myself so clearly in my mind, that's what I want to do. I just want to be a loving rock. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know fully what it would look like, but that took me on a long journey, working in homeless shelters and hospices and doing grief work and going into prisons and eventually going back and getting my master in social work. All just driven by that central guiding question, right? What does it mean to be a loving rock? How can you be an open environment so that someone's soul can truly emerge? And so the intention of the training program is really we're cultivating those skills. And so part of it is there's a strong foundation in loving awareness. Yeah. What does it mean to have a cultivated awareness that is free of inner struggle and has the capacity to hold our suffering in softness? Yeah. Quality of awareness that is warm and soft and open and compassionate. And then there's a part of it that is very focused on how do we be a loving awareness or a loving rock for other people? Yeah, how do we show up in community? How do we show up with another person one-on-one? What does it mean to provide spiritual support to another person? Yeah, we have a very strong model for spiritual support where we allow space for someone's spiritual truth to come into the room and the full expression of someone's humanity to come into the room. And we don't prioritize one or the other. right? We see them as both equal manifestations of someone's truth, someone's divine humanity. And so what does it mean to be a spiritual support facilitator? If we're not trying to fix someone or change someone, what is our role, right? So that someone's soul can emerge in the space, and so someone can access their own deepest wisdom. And so that's what the training program is. And the snippet here is specifically a section in the program on companioning. And Anna is a great companion. She's a trained therapist. She's a spiritual support facilitator. She's a group facilitator through SCP. And so she taught this class on these companioning, what she calls micro skills, right? The skills of attunement, the skills of attending, the skills of reflective listening, the skills of empathy. How do we listen to someone? How do we have a conversation with someone that's supportive? A couple of things of note, there was long stretches of it that were cut out because there's various experiential exercises that don't translate well to a podcast. Also, we wanted to honor everyone's confidentiality, so all of the group discussions were cut out. So this is really just the heart of the sections of the lecture that would lend itself well to a podcast. So this short little snippet of about 40 minutes is actually titrated down from a 2-hour lecture that she did. The other thing I'll say, if you want to see a group of people practicing these things together as a spiritual practice, and if you want to be a part of that, the best way to do so is really, truly to join our SCP Discord and to join one of our online satsang hangs. So, all that to say, I'm really excited to introduce Anna's lecture.
So today I'm going to be talking to you about practical skills on how to be a loving rock and how do we tend and love suffering in another person. Okay. So a little bit about me. I'm Anna. Outside of Sacred Community Project and satsang, I work as a therapist. I'm a therapist in California. And my specialty is in attachment-based trauma and spiritual-based counseling. I really see this work as my spiritual practice. It's how I do seva. It's my karma yoga. It's my bhakti yoga. And the reason I say that is because the more and more that I sit with people who are suffering, who are struggling in any kind of way, and I become more of a spacious presence for them. And I create an environment with myself and the spiritual work that I do on myself. It helps that person really open their heart and become vulnerable. And when they do that, I often find that we actually share a lot of similarities. We share a lot of the same suffering. And I use my work as a therapist to pretty much help me progress on my spiritual path too. Like I really, really believe that the more that we connect with people, the more that we can experience oneness. And as people share themselves, I really see this common thread of like, we really are sharing the same stuff. For a really long time, I used to think that like my own personal suffering is like my own problems, like it's all that I know and it's like something that I deal with alone. But it's really not true. The more you sit with people and you talk to people and you connect with people, you really start to see like, wow, we're really all in this together. So my intentions for today is to help you all learn practical skills to improve your ability to compassionately and lovingly tend and be with suffering. And then at some point, we're going to share and receive group wisdom on being a loving rock. And then later on today, we're going to engage in a short practice. Humans need connection and love. I think that's a really important place that we really want to sort of frame our companioning work. It's through our authentic heart to heart relating that can reveal our true nature. When connection and love aren't there in our lives, we can suffer pretty greatly. And I don't know if you guys have heard, but the US Surgeon General released an advisory last year announcing that we're in an epidemic of loneliness and isolation. Social connection impacts so much of our health in ways that, like, without connection and love, we really suffer in so many different ways, not just emotionally and psychologically either, but that it affects our bodies and it affects our health. And I don't know how many of you've heard of like co-regulation. I know in Satsang today, we talked a little bit about co-regulation, but it's true. When your friend or your partner or your dog, even when they're feeling regulated and when they're feeling calm and they're okay and they feel safe, that sort of rubs off on you in an unconscious way, right? And so when we experience connection, we can regulate with each other. Like the work that we do on ourselves to be happy or peaceful or centered, that can go such a long way for another being without us even trying, without us even having to need to say anything. And I really want to drive that point of like, without connection, we experience such profound suffering, and life will always have its challenges, but we get through life so much easier when we have others in our lives to support us, people that we can trust and can depend on and know that we can fall back on when, shit hits the fan. And we really need to feel like we belong. And so as we approach companioning, we can use connection and love as a framework to guide our way of being. What I've learned so far being with other people and their suffering is that a lot of the times people really hate it. It's subtle. They don't say it straight to your face, but it's subtle. They really don't like it when you try to fix them. And they really don't like it when you try to solve their problems for them. I find that when I try to do that and I approach from that space, um, I don't think I do as well. And the other person seems not to be like very responsive. But when I'm practicing this Ram Dass quote, people just blossom in front of me. And it's sort of like darshan in a lot of ways, because when we allow people to be who they are and provide that space, they can really show up as their own souls. Not with like this false pretense or this ego. They can really be who they are. And when they share their heart, you realize, like, wow, like we really share one heart. Like whatever you're saying right now and expressing, even though I'm like the blank slate therapist, it's like, I wish I could scream, or not scream, but like yell, like, oh my God, I'm going through the same things too. Or, oh my God, I could really relate. But, I can't always do that. Um, yeah. And so my hope is that we can all work towards cultivating an environment where, with our own beingness, our being, our presence can be that environment where if a person wants to come up for air and breathe, they can, that they can be their souls with us. And we experience darshan in that way. At least that's my experience. So, what I'm about to teach you are a bunch of practical skills. So, it might be useful to have a pen and a paper on deck as I plow through the next couple of slides, because it's going to be a little bit dense and a lot of words on the screen. Basically, I'm going to give you a crash course of my grad class on how to be with other people. I adapted a lot of what we're going to be learning today from psychotherapy, from clinical practice, from my own grad school experience. And what inspired me to teach this class was really coming from my own experience. Growing up, I didn't have a lot of like loving, spacious, present people in my life. And so I was just kind of suffering on my own. And when I did go to people for support, oftentimes people just like didn't know how to hold my pain or be with my pain. And they're loving people and they're well intentioned, but they just didn't know how to be there for me. And on the other end, too, like as much as I wanted to be there for someone who was going through it, I also didn't know how to do it either until I went to grad school. And so oftentimes when we're trying to like help somebody, we're kind of aiming in the dark. And so I'm hoping that these skills that I've learned in grad school, that you can apply them in your own life too. And anyone can learn these skills. Like when I was taking this class, I was like, wow, these skills are just like, I mean, they're not easy. They take practice, but anyone can really learn them and they can be applied anywhere in any circumstance, mostly. And my hope is that when you learn these skills, that you can use these skills to foster and strengthen your community and your way of caring and being in the world. Could be your family and your friends. You might find that you're talking to them differently and treating them differently in a way that feels a little better. And hopefully, these skills can also enhance your sense of personal intimacy and help you connect better with others. Yeah. And I really feel like all of this aligns with SCP's values that we're committed to lowering barriers so that we can all access these offerings. So that you don't have to go to grad school to know how to do these things, that you can do it, learn to do this for free. This is what we're doing right now. Okay. So I call these core micro skills. So the first and most important thing and the most foundational of what we do is cultivating presence. Okay. And the reason I say this is because all of our ability to do anything, to be with another person, really rests upon our ability to be fully present, mindful, and engaged. Like this is incredibly foundational. Like if there's one thing that you can learn out of this whole class is hopefully it's this, and then you can forget the others. But really, it's like we need to be in a space where we can actually hold another person's suffering. Because if we're distracted or like we got something going on inside of us that needs our attention, it's going to take us away from fully being able to be present with someone. And in psychology, we talk about it in two ways: attending and attunement. They're very, very similar, but there is a slight difference. Attending is our ability to be fully present and to engage without distractions. So, with attending, we're trying to cultivate an environment where someone can feel safe and supported. And we can do these in two ways. We can either psychologically attend or we can physically attend. So, attending is like we're just sort of noticing, like we're attending to this person, we're actively listening. We can kind of attend to like the common thread in their story. We can reflect back what they're saying. We're tracking what might be going on with them emotionally or cognitively, like what are they thinking about. And then we attend physically by just noticing like the person's body language. What are their nonverbals expressing to us? Are they like this? Like, are they like talking like this, where their face is all scrunched? Like, what is that expressing to you? What is that saying to you? Right? Or are they talking like this? That's some ways that we could physically attend to another person. And the other important thing too is that, and this is where it kind of gets tricky, is not only are we attending to that other person, but we're simultaneously also attending to ourselves. Am I listening? How are my nonverbals and my body language? Like, what am I expressing with my body and my facial expressions, or the way that I'm talking and the way that I'm expressing myself? Okay. And then attunement is slightly different because attunement is something that we all naturally have. Attunement is our innate ability to understand, know, and read the needs of another person and to respond to those needs. An example of this are mothers. Mothers are really naturally just good at this because, like, say, for example, a baby is not going to be able to tell you through words that it's hungry or that it needs physical comfort or that it needs to go to sleep. And I find that a lot of us as human beings, we're constantly looking for attunement. We're we have this basic need to or like desire to be attuned to feel like someone knows and understands and can read our own needs and to be able to respond to them. Um, so I need it, you need it, we all need attunement, but also remembering that we can be the person to attune to others too, and that we naturally have it. Um, and it just also it takes a lot of practice to get better at it too. Another example of attunement is, say, for example, you have a partner in your life or a child or a pet, and you know that um, this being gets groggy in the morning because XYZ, and you know that they get groggy or like upset. And so attunement is when you notice that there's a need and you're like, okay, I noticed that my partner is upset in the morning. Maybe they just need a little bit of caffeine, or maybe they just need a hug. And so you offer that, and maybe they're not telling you because they themselves don't know that they have that need. And when you give them that, what they need, it's a form of connection and love. It's a form of care. Um, Another great tip that I can offer about attunement and how to get better at it is to embody or imagine yourself as the divine mother, the great divine mother who um, just automatically already knows your needs without you even knowing it. And so there are many ways that you can do this, but what I like to do is sort of tell myself and visualize myself as the divine mother and to really feel that in my heart. I might like create some space to really feel that in my heart before I get into a session with a client. And, um, or I know that like someone who's really hurting, like a friend or something, and they're talking to me, I can imagine myself as a divine mother and attune from that space to give me a source of confidence, right? Another important thing to know too is that when we attend to other people too, we want to be mindful of our interpretations. So, for example, like attending is like being able to interpret what another person's like body language is saying, what their nonverbals are saying. But um, everyone's nonverbals is very culturally defined. So, for example, like what I know about Asians is that we don't directly look into another's eyes. And so, as a Westerner, when someone is doing that, we might see that as a sign of being disrespectful, but really it's just a cultural misalignment, if that makes sense. So, we really want to be open to our interpretations and our bias when we're attending to others that we might misread what it might mean. Okay. And then another thing that's really important to know too is that as we're sort of cultivating our presence, we want to be self regulated enough. I think it's sort of impossible to expect that we're always calm and centered and peaceful all the time, especially when we're sitting with another being. Like, I think that's kind of a tall ask. And I've definitely done that to myself before where I'll sort of be like, well, I can't be a therapist because I'm not calm all the time or I'm not centered all the time. So, like, how can I continue the work that I do? And I started to realize, like, no, that's just impossible. Like, that's just not realistic. Like, I'm human too. Like, I'm not going to be calm all the time. And I don't think calm is always going to be the goal. Um, And so we want to be self-regulated enough, right? Like we want to be able to not have our feelings or our like thoughts be so loud that we can't attend or attune to another being. We want to have some spaciousness in ourselves to be able to do that. So the goal of us cultivating presence and our ability to attend and attune is to really just build connection and rapport and to create an atmosphere of trust with that other person or being. And I wrote here that attunement feels good. And I think I've mentioned that before, that it feels really good to be attuned to. So the more that you're able to do it, the more that I think you're going to go a really long way for another person and also for yourself too, right? Because our ability to attune to another is also sort of indirectly tied to our ability to attune to ourselves, right? Like, how can we know the needs of another person if we don't even know like what we need in this moment? I think that our society and our culture kind of creates this environment where we have to be on the go all the time. And we tend to be very distracted and we kind of check out and we don't even know, like, in this moment, like, do I even need to go to the bathroom? Do I need a drink of water? Right. And so for me, I think it gets easier to attune to others when we kind of know what we need at any given moment. The other important thing to know is um, how do we help people feel seen? And a lot of our communication happens non-verbally. So the first skill is called solar. I don't really use this actively in my own life, like the term solar, but I think this is a great way to sort of frame like how you could carry yourself non-verbally to express safety. So when you're sitting with another being and you're listening to them, it might be helpful to kind of like sit straight and not hunched over. You can want to create like an open posture. When you're creating an open posture with your body, you're kind of insinuating to the other person that you're open to them, that you're receiving them, that you're someone that they could trust. When you lean forward towards that person, it sort of indicates to them that you're interested, that you're curious. Eye contact is also really important too. So, keeping eye contact can communicate that you're interested in them, that you're attempting to connect with them. And if you find that that other person is really uncomfortable with eye contact, and this is true for a lot of folks, I find, then that's okay. You might want to look away once in a while to help them feel comfortable, but always kind of go back and look into their eyes if you can. Because then it lets them know that you're still there and that you're still interested and that you still care and that you're connecting with them. Um, and then we want to be relaxed as much as we can. The other skill is called tracking. And tracking is our ability to follow and observe both nonverbal and verbal behaviors. So, again, this is like we're tracking their body language, we're tracking their facial expressions, their tone, how they're saying things. And from that tracking, we're able to intuit like how this person may be feeling, how this person, what they're trying to communicate with us. We're also tracking like the content of what they're saying and any feelings that there might be holding. You might even track or notice any themes or patterns in what they're sharing. So, with that being said, mirroring is another skill that or tool that we can do to help people feel really seen. And this is really subtle. So, all of these skills are really subtle ways that we can help people feel really understood and seen. Mirroring is something that we all do naturally. We don't think about it. It just sort of happens when we're connecting with someone. So I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you're connecting with someone, you're talking to them, and then you suddenly notice that you both have your legs crossed in the same direction. Or maybe like I've noticed that like when I'm talking and listening to a client online or something, they're doing this and I'll find myself doing this too. Or I guess like, or if I'm doing this and the person is like feeling connected to me, they might also do this too, right? It's just sort of something that just happens naturally. And this is also known as embodied empathy because we are using our bodies to connect to that other person, right? Um, and you might even try to do that intentionally too. So if you notice that, like, that person is crossing their legs or crossing their arms, you could do that too in a way of like trying to mimic or empathize deeper with how that person might be feeling. And then you can tune into your own body and be like, okay, this person is crossing their arms as they're talking, and I'm doing this too. I think I can get a sense of maybe what they're feeling because I can feel it in my own body. Right. Or you can also use mirroring intentionally by, say, like they're closing their arms and this feels sort of tight and closed, and it's not expressing like vulnerability. It's sort of expressing like a sense of protectiveness or guardedness. So you might want to do something like the opposite of that and keep an open posture. And as you keep your posture open and that person is starting to feel connected to you and they feel listened to you, then they'll naturally on their own, because they're mirroring you, will start to open up and have an open posture as well. Another thing that you can do too to help the other person feel seen is to use something called minimal encouragers. And I think we all have our own personal way of doing this. Minimal encouragers are little things that we do to help that other person know that we're still listening, that we're tracking, that we're still here. Like, people go on their storytelling and you could be like, mm, okay, yeah, mm-hmm. Ah, I see. Okay, okay, okay. Like everyone has their own way of doing this. You can also do like soft head nods, like wait, I'm doing like, okay, listening. Yeah, I'm showing interest. Okay. Okay. No, that's a great question. Um, yeah, it can actually get in the way sometimes and be really distracting. So, a helpful tip is to kind of use that seldomly. It really depends on person to person and depends on who you're talking to. Um, you could say, once in a while, but not all the time to not like take away from the other person. So, last thoughts about mirroring. Mirroring is also a great way to sort of gauge how connected you are to that person too. If you're noticing that like you're sharing the same body language, I think that's a good sign that um, you're on the mark with connection. Okay. And then this is probably the most important slide. I mean, I say that about every slide, but this one's really important for what we're going to do later on today. We're going to make some time to practice these skills, mainly these 4 skills or 3 skills. So the first skill in listening is reflection. So, reflection, when we use this, it really helps the other person feel like you are listening. Um, and reflection is when we choose a specific part or feeling in what that person is sharing and we share it back to that person. Um, you can use reflection to focus on a certain topic or to change topics. You can use reflection to focus on a theme or a feeling. And paraphrasing and summarizing are the way that I see it is that those skills are sort of part of reflection. Paraphrasing is selectively expressing what the person had just said in your own words. And then summarizing is more like recapping what that person said in major ideas or themes or patterns or feelings. Like you could say, like, for example, like, oh, it sounds like you're going through a huge transformation right now. Right. And you could say, or paraphrasing could be like, okay, you went to the store and after that you got hurt on the way home. And then refocusing is when we go back to a topic or a theme or something early on in the conversation. So this could look like, I'm wondering if we can go back to the time where you were a child and you lost your mom. Or you can refocus by saying, like, how do you think this relates to your divorce? Or earlier, we were talking about being with people who had cancer. Can we talk about that a little more? And you might want to refocus and go back because maybe that part feels like it needs more tending to, that it needs more space. Refocusing can also help the other person sort of go back to the heart of the conversation. If they're anything like me, I tend to tangent. And so if they're tangenting, refocusing can be a helpful way to help them get back to the heart of it. And that can help the person feel like you're listening and that you're tracking what they're talking about. So emotions. So this is how this is another way of helping people feel really seen and understood. I think a lot of the times, at least for me and my own experience, is that like people will talk and they'll share a story, but they'll have a hard time sharing their feelings about the story or expressing feeling. And I think that it can be helpful if we sort of help that person name or identify a feeling that they're might having, especially if they're venting. So like saying things like, I hear how frustrated you are about this, or like, I sense that you're apprehensive about this situation. Reflecting back what that person might be feeling can feel really supportive. It can help the other person feel like you really get them and that you're feeling it with them. If the person doesn't know how they're feeling and you're saying like, wow, that sounds really angry, then they'll be like, no, I'm not angry. Then that's okay too if we miss a tune. I think it's only human that we make mistakes and we can't 100% understand how that other person is feeling. Or sometimes, like, we do know exactly how they're feeling because we can feel what they're feeling in our own bodies and we're feeling it with them as they're sharing their experience. And then they're saying, like, well, I'm not angry, I'm not sad. But clearly they are through their voice or through their nonverbals. And we don't want to push them. We want to make space for however they're experiencing whatever it is that they're experiencing. And we could be like, oh, okay, you're not angry. Or like, I mean, there's so many ways to do this. Like, it really depends on the context and who you're talking to. But if you really feel like it could benefit that person to help them sort of acknowledge what they're feeling, you could double down and be like, I can really sense that this is really hard for you based on how you're sharing this information with me. And that can help the person sort of like settle in and get real with themselves. Okay. Another thing that you could do too is to affirm that person's strengths or identify strengths in their story or in their character or their personality. This can really be validating or encouraging and help them build their self-esteem. So you could say things like, yeah, I really hear that life has been really hard for you, but I know that just from knowing you this far, I know that you have so much resilience and capability to get through this, something like that. And then you can also validate someone's feelings. Like you could say, yeah, that makes sense to me why you've been feeling sad, and say why. Sometimes I like to incorporate like some sort of educational piece in the validation, especially with clients. So they'll say like, I'm really, really anxious. And I'll be like, well, that makes sense to me that you're feeling anxious, given that this is how the human body works and yada, yada. And that can feel really affirming. Universalizing is a type of validation, and universalizing is when we try to frame that person's experience as being common or shared, Sometimes that can be helpful in like helping the person feel less alone or different in their experience, but sometimes that's not always useful. I think in the height of emotions, we tend to want to feel like we're seen and that we're special in our own feelings and our experiences. So I don't always recommend universalizing someone's experience because that could really take away from, it could be a form of invalidation, if that makes sense. And then understanding. Okay, so this is very wordy. You don't have to write all of this down. But here are some ways that we can help our own understanding of that person and hopefully extend some of that understanding to that person, like helping them feel understood. And I think a great place to start is to go into the space with this person, leading with curiosity. I think a lot of times we kind of come in with our own stuff or our own biases or our own experiences. And sometimes that can really take away from the other person. And again, our spiritual practices are all of the mindfulness that we do, all the sitting down that we do, that helps us become more spacious and that helps us be more open and more curious. I think a lot of mindfulness is being with curiosity, like curious to the present moment, to what's going on around us, to what's going on in our bodies. And we basically extend that practice to being with another person. We don't really know what they're going to share. We don't really know what they're feeling. Maybe we don't even know that person very well. But if we can lead with curiosity, I think that can go a really, really long way. For example, this just happened in my personal life. My partner got really, really upset because his cousin texted him and said, "Hey, you got to speak up more. How come you're not speaking up more? I kind of feel like you're checked out." Right? Even though this person has good intentions, like trying to help my partner speak up, my partner felt attacked. He felt like his cousin was assuming stuff about him that isn't true. And the reason I bring that up is sometimes I think we all have a tendency to do that. And when we lead with curiosity, we sort of create space for that person and not assuming what that person has going on. Does that make sense? Oh, that makes sense. Okay. And as we're leading with curiosity, naturally, we're going to have questions. And I think it's good to ask questions because questions can help us like clarify something. It can help us explore a situation or elaborate on a theme, and it helps us gather information about what's going on. And asking questions can also be used to direct and guide the conversation. There are two ways that you can ask the questions. You can ask like a close-ended question, and that is sort of like there's pros and cons to that. Like when you ask a closed-ended question, it kind of doesn't leave a lot of room for the person to be tangential or tangent. But when we ask an open-ended question, it kind of leaves more power to the other person to explore or expand on whatever it is that's like whatever is going on with them. We also want to be careful of like tangential questions or ratata questioning. Ratata questionings is basically when you ask a question repetitively. So like I'll ask questions like, so where do you live? Okay. And how does that make you feel? Okay. And what are you going to do with that? So it kind of feels like they're being interrogated. So we want to sort of balance questioning with statements and reflections or silence. And then tangential questions is like asking questions that have nothing to do with what they're talking about. Sometimes we ask questions because we're just genuinely curious. Like maybe they're talking about an experience, and then you ask like, "Oh, where did you get that training from?" Or like, "Where was the retreat you went on?" So like, we want to be careful and mindful of that. And then interpretation is when we make an educated or an intuitive hunch about the person or their situation. So interpretation is sort of a high level skill, but we kind of do this when we like help people naturally, I think. We try to understand them. And so we can wonder out loud, like, I wonder if whatever you're going through has something to do with your relationship with your mom, or could it be that you're struggling with intimacy? Or you could be like, what's your take on this? You can invite the person to make an interpretation of their situation themselves. And then lastly, we can check in or check out. Checking in is like we're assessing how the person is doing. We can use this to ask permission or inform someone about something that we're trying to do with them. For example, you could say like, I'd like to check in on how you're feeling, or would it be okay if we practice this together? Okay. My last slide was about self-compassion, and I saved it for last because I felt it was that important. And I say that because we really can't companion with anyone if we don't have self-compassion. I mean, you still could, but I feel like we won't be as effective. And I was going to share this quote from Thich Nhat Hanh where he talks about how we're like a leaf on a tree, right? And it feels like we're alone, we're just a singular leaf, but we're just part of this entire tree. And when we take care of ourselves, we're really taking care of other people, right? Like we really, really need to love ourselves and have self compassion and tune into ourselves. Um, and even though we all come with really good intentions and we want to serve, we want to help people, we want to love on people. But if we're doing so much of that and not balancing our own self love and our own tending to ourselves, it can only go like so far, right? Our happiness and our peace is so instrumental in the kind of work that we do in our service work. Like we really serve from that place, and it can just go such a long way. And sometimes like we can't always be there for people. Maybe we just have so much shit going on with ourselves and our own lives, and we've like lost touch of peace and happiness, and we're just like in the thick of our own suffering. That's okay. I'm learning that a lot of what I do as a therapist is having a lot of humility and being real with myself, that sometimes I just can't be there for someone else because I need me right now. Yeah. When we are being with someone else in their suffering, that's like an indirect way of us being with ourselves in our suffering, right? Like we can only show up as far as we can with ourselves, if that makes sense. Like if I don't know, if I'm not in touch with my grief and I'm sitting with someone who's in their grief, I'm going to be really mega uncomfortable because I'm actively avoiding my grief. And that's like no good for the other person if I can't be authentic. Okay. That's it. I love you guys. Thank you for listening to me for so long.